What's up, everyone? Hello, how's it going? Think we're live right now. I wanted to start up a real quick kind of impromptu live stream just to see, just to have people join me while I watch some YouTube videos. I'm going to be doing some research. We are interviewing this guy right here on my screen, Jeremy from BuildASoil. We are going to be interviewing him in a few days this Sunday live on Cannabis. So it's been a little while. It's been a few weeks or so since I've watched a BuildASoil video or really kind of thought about this stuff. So I really wanted to watch a couple videos just to kind of get my mind jogging about the kinds of stuff that Jeremy likes to talk about and the stuff maybe that we could learn from him. So I'm just trying to get some interview question ideas. We've already written down kind of some stuff already, but I wanted to see what kind of comes to mind after watching some of this guy's videos. So feel free to throw stuff in the chat if you end up watching in the live stream. Feel free to leave a question that you might have for Jeremy, because yeah, totally up for interesting ideas here. But yeah, let's go. Let's get it on.
If you don't, your plants are going to be, they're going to snap or the whole bush can break. Now, genetics is a big key outdoors. If you've got the best genetics, and the best, what I mean is good for your region, they'll handle the weather that you have, they'll finish before it gets too cold in your region. That's ideal. Indoors, we pick anything we want. But outdoors, I think, instead of trying to fight everything, you get genetics that are really good for outdoors. Strong side branching, less likely to break, resistant to mold and mildew, good for full season, will finish on time. In the 10x10 series right now, we're running a Royal Black Dog Kush from Rootwise, and all of his selections were made in his greenhouse outdoors to this area, and so they do phenomenal outdoors. They do great indoors, but it's like they go another level when you can put them in their proving ground where they were designed. And so when it comes to outdoors, if you've got buddies that grow in your area that swear they've got something that did really well, I would try it. And each year you can get slightly better at choosing which genetics did best for your area. But the short answer is yes, trellis. Defoliating may not be as important, right? But is important to trellis. Okay, next, Winslow says, hey Jeremy, huge fan of BAS. Thank you. If I was to transplant 5-gallon pots into a 2x4 grassroots living soil bed, would I be digging up too much living soil to transplant into the 2x4 bed? Would it defeat the purpose of no-till? Hope you see this. Thanks for everything you're doing. Winslow, this is a really good question. I'm happy we put it in here because it'll answer it for a lot more people. I'd say there's no real no-till that we're doing. We call it no-till because we're keeping the soil, we're not throwing it away. But buddies have called it low-till, and a lot of times because they're transplanting. You can see that some of the facilities at GLP Nevada, you can look up his grow. But over at that particular location, if you see their photos on Instagram, it's just beautiful. They do 1-gallon transplants with open bottoms directly on the bed. Now, I think it's genius because it removes the labor of having to dig it up, and labor is a big issue when it comes to keeping a tight schedule and keeping profit when it comes to farming. So we need to be really cognizant of extra labor wasters, and digging a whole bunch of 5-gallon holes could be a big amount of labor, but for you, not a problem at all. And of course, it's going to dig up that soil. And so many of us are really romantic about no-till in the sense that it's like, I never want to disturb anything. No fungal strands. I want all the worms, everything to be completely intact. But I feel like digging up your 5-gallon, putting it in there and going is totally acceptable. And if that's the weakest link for you, is that you'd rather have a big transplant to plug and play into your bed, do it. I don't see any problem with it. If you can find another way to get the same results in flower with transplanting a smaller transplant, I think that would be ideal, but it really doesn't matter. Like for instance, if you had a really stretchy strain, you might be able to transplant like a 1-gallon and still have a similar veg time because you take advantage of the stretch. You can see in our 10x10 series right now, the Royal Black Dog is short because it's not a stretcher, which is great for a number of reasons, but if I want it to stretch, the Fruit by the Funk is just unlimited stretch, and so I could have flipped a lot earlier. Those are kind of tactical advantages based on your genetics that you're running. So when it comes to digging up the 5-gallon, I would say don't be too hard on yourself if that's what you got to do. I don't think you're ruining living soil. I don't think you're going to get any less results than if you had just dug up a small amount. But I get why you're asking. I feel like once we've decided to do no-till, you feel like a hypocrite for tilling it at all, even if you're just transplanting. But the goal remains the same. We need to grow our plants, and we're doing it for that only. That's the only purpose. So do it. I will say that the cause.
All right, so if you just joined us and you're not sure what's going on right now, I'm just trying to get some ideas for interviewing Jeremy from BuildASoil. What's up, Stormblessed? Thanks for joining the chat. So I'm just trying to get some ideas for an interview that I'll be doing with Jeremy this Sunday. And I just came up with some ideas while I was listening to him talk. One of the things that I definitely want to talk to him about is growing outdoors. Is it what he thinks about growing in fabric pots or containers versus growing in the ground? Kind of what he recommends there. Be interested to hear what his thoughts are on that. Also, very interested in hearing just him kind of walk through how to re-amend large containers of soil. I think he's talked about it on a recent video of his that I watched. It gave me an idea of how to do it. So I'd really be interested in hearing how he suggests doing it. As an example, I grow in 30-gallon pots outside, and I've dumped out those pots and remade them as a way to re-amend them. Or I think this year what I'm going to do is a different strategy. So I'm curious to hear what Jeremy suggests people do for large containers. So those are a couple of questions that I want to ask him. Let's see. Curious if he talks about what else he talks about in this video. Rove beetles. Let's see what he says about rove beetles.
Arizona says, where do the rove beetles come from? Good question. I highlighted this, and so obviously we're getting some questions about it. I think that rove beetles are phenomenal, and it's a very important part of the process. I don't recommend buying lots of them if you can get them naturally. So they're going to come from Build-A-Flower, they're going to come from the Colorado Worm Company compost, sometimes in the worm castings, but typically the reason why is they are omnivores. They can eat a lot of different things. So not only do they eat the fungus gnat larva and fly larva and all the things that we don't like, they also can survive on a number of items, and so they'll be able to persist. And if you're top dressing with compost, the Oli Mountain has it, Cooko has it, there's going to be rove beetles, which is great because you can go spend hundreds of dollars on rove beetles to try and buy them and inoculate your grow with them. I just recommend against that because if you're using compost, you'll have them, and typically in numbers that are higher than average. And we want to avoid that because the last thing we want to do is just trade fungus gnats for rove beetles when it comes to the herb. But I will tell you, I'd much prefer to have rove beetles. They typically only climb up so far. They get on the exterior of a plant. They're pretty easy to remove. Of course, with anything in living soil, we don't want to have massive populations of any one species. We'd like to have an ecosystem, kind of a balance. And I've noticed that when you do a no-till for a while in larger containers, those things kind of come to a balance. But it seems like the earth box or the autopots, for whatever reason, maybe because of the top dressing in the smaller container, it can kind of proliferate. And so it's up to you. There's some people that actually attach like an inverted cup to the stalk or any way to try and stop them from climbing. As far as your question, where do they come from? They are beneficial and they don't do damage to plants, and so we encourage them, and they usually come from compost, along with predator mites and a number of other things. Just like rove beetles, if you have those little bulbous predator mites that come in the compost, and you have a really thick, wet mulch area with tons of cut leaves and everything, you can boost that population a little too high. And when they're running out of material, some of those will actually climb up your plant. So regardless, in living soil, we want to be cognizant, but typically the beneficials are going to come from the compost. Okay, Dev has a question and says, you mentioned that you...
So that was a good one. I thought that was really interesting. That gave me a good idea for a thing to talk to him about on Sunday. I think I want to ask him what he suggests. What is a cost-effective way to approach beneficial insects? If you're a home grower and you've ever tried to buy like predator insects or beneficial insects, it's very expensive. Even like basically once you get out beyond like ladybugs and stuff like that, the bugs get really expensive, and especially when you are ordering things like rove beetles and other bugs that are kind of, or mites in the soil. Those things can cost basically $100 or $80 in that range, because you're spending like $30-$40 for the bugs, and then another $30-$40 on shipping. And so it really adds up. So you definitely got to find bugs that are cost effective. And I'm sure he'll have some good ideas, stuff like, you know, getting bugs from your compost. But you're gonna obviously need to find compost that actually has bugs in it. What's up, Junior? What's up? Thanks for joining. So yeah, let's see what else he talks about in this video. Grow lights, living soil. Let's go to living soil, because we are interested in talking about that in tomorrow's interview.
But anyways, check out the...
Oops, I gotta mute myself real quick. Oops, sorry.
Colorado Worm Company castings. I don't think you can go wrong with those. Chris says, are all the soil recipes you sell considered living soil, including the Coots Take and Bake Kit? Yes. In fact, we're going through labeling and trying to make a full printed bag for all 50 states. And one of the catches is using the word living. They want us to quantify the amount of life that's in it. And I feel really foolish guaranteeing microbes on a bag, like literally writing the microbe name and the amount that's in there. I'll leave that to a microbial product. I think that once you put it in the bag, I can't guarantee what's in there, but I guarantee you there's life. And when it comes to compost, that's what makes the living component. Even if you take compost and get it aged and old and dry, I believe once you plant roots into it or get it moist, it's going to be teeming with life again. And so the living soil, the verbiage comes from the forums where we were trying to say, look, we're not just buying potting soil. We're making a soil with a high percentage of compost and adding rock dust and things that mimic soil on a healthy farm a lot more than a bagged potting soil would. And that's what we wanted to coin, the living soil, because that would interact with the roots and start to take the whole process in consideration. Where we're feeding the soil, we're not feeding the plant. The soil takes care of the plant. That's a living soil. Where if you're just bypassing the soil using chemicals or using water-soluble nutrients 100% of the time for all of your nutrition, it's kind of like putting an IV in the arm, and you're no longer a living soil. I'd say that you're more hydro at that point. And so that's really the discussion. Every one of our recipes is a living soil. I would say arguably the one that may be the least living soil would be our Heady Starts seedling soil, as that's really designed for porosity and for texture, but it does have worm castings because we really don't want to compromise on that in any of our recipes. So for what it's worth, the living part of it came as a way to differentiate ourselves on the forums from people that were just growing in soil, which soil at that time was anything you buy in a bag that was not hydro, right? People were calling ProMix soil. And so we stuck with that, and that's what we've all called it over the longest time, was living organic soil. And I think that's the term that came before we called it no-till, because many of us were recycling the living organic soil in the beginning by dumping it out of its smaller containers, re-amending it, and putting it back in smaller containers. But it's better in a larger ecosystem, so a lot of us started going to large containers and keeping the soil and not throwing it out and never disturbing it. So some people call it undisturbed living soil, low-till, no-till, many different words, all really meaning the same thing. And it's just a grasping at communication to share with someone what we're talking about. So all of them are living soil recipes. I hope that helps answer your question. Certainly the Take and Bake, lots of compost.
All right, so that gave me a good idea. And also, if you're watching right now, we have a number of people that are watching. What I'm doing right now is I'm trying to get some ideas for questions that I would ask Jeremy when I interview him this Sunday on Cannabuzz. It's going to be live on Cannabuzz, and then we'll post it on YouTube about a week from now. So anyways, preparing for that interview, trying to get some ideas for questions. And one of the things that I think it would be interesting to talk to him about or ask him is about soil testing. I don't know, if you're watching right now, let me know in the chat. Have you ever done soil testing? Soil testing to me seems like it's kind of it's intimidating. I think it's intimidating for two reasons. A, it costs a decent amount of money. I think it's like I think it's like $100 all in, because I think you spend about $50 to get the test, and then another 30 or so dollars, or maybe more, I can't remember, to get your soil sample analyzed, so or your report analyzed. So it's not cheap, but I would be curious to just have Jeremy talk through how soil testing works, why it's important, and how it works. And I think his company offers a service, so it'd be a layup for him to talk about that, and I'm sure it makes things easier. I just don't really understand how his company makes it easier. Um, cool. So let's see. Uh, let's see. What other videos does he have that would be interesting? Recycling soil. That could be interesting. He talks about adding minerals in this one. Let's see. Um, Sensors, extra aeration, trichomes. Let's see what he says about trichomes.
MBS says trichomes are
Oops, sorry. I gotta mute myself.
only made during lights on. There's no evidence that 48 hours of darkness does anything other than stop chlorophyll production. They are now thinking that 48 hours of lights on before chop will help. But what do you think? I don't experiment in my life, right, and harvesting when I want. I wouldn't put much thought into tinkering with 48 hours of light at the end or 48 hours of darkness. To me, this is an entire process, and all of it needs to be done right. At the same time, I don't think you're going to hurt anything by doing 48 hours of darkness or 48 hours of light, other than extending it for 2 days longer. And if that gets you 2 days longer, I think that's good, because a lot of people are trying to harvest early. So those are my thoughts. Twisp says, hi, Jeremy. In the tropical tent.
That totally didn't answer the question. Or, I mean, he just kind of like sidestepped the actual question, I felt like. Or he basically just said, do whatever you want, as long as your weed comes out good, which is fine. I'd be curious to hear his actual answer, though. Junior said, I think he goes through Logan Labs. Yeah, I think he does. I think what he does is I think what BuildASoil does is they have people get their soil tested through Logan Labs, and then he offers some sort of service where they tell you, based on the Logan Labs report, like how much amendments to use or whatever. I don't really understand. Like, I just want to understand all the steps, because it's multiple steps, and that just on its face seems kind of intimidating. And then, like I said, I think it's not cheap. I think it's like at least $100. But I'm sure I would imagine it's important, or it could be really helpful. So I'd be curious to hear his pitch, because I also feel like you can just eyeball it and say fuck it and just like re-amend your pot. You know what I mean? Anyways, let's see. Why break the root ball? Oh, I don't know. Oh, well, that would be interesting to hear him talk about that. Do they break this one up into chapters? They don't. Damn it. Okay. Let's see. I will try to find an interesting part.
Go ahead and drop them in here. I was reading some of the questions after the last FAQ and I was laughing. I think it's going to be fun to take some of the answers and go further with an FAQ of the FAQ. That if there's something I can skip and not just stuff that I've come to do and as common. But when I open up that tent door, I don't want it to cause a rift of pollen flying at me. So we have very little air movement, and I'm hoping to keep the humidity up in there at least enough where it's not just static flying at me the second I open it. And I'm going to take some, basic principles. I'm not going to go in there and check on it all the time. I'll use the window, especially when pollen starts flying. I've got it all closed right now. But as far as if I were to open the tent and then want to go check in the other one, I'm going to wash my hands, Probably have like my jacket, just take it off, get started. Signalman says, as a master gardener, I was taught to break up the root ball. You didn't break up the root ball, why? When it comes to breaking up the root ball, I believe a lot of times they're doing it because they're trying to open up that root space and make sure that it's not root bound. I avoid that by not getting root bound plants, and I don't need to rip them up. I think that they have the right amount of roots, and I've never had a problem from doing this. There's many different reasons that I'll do things, but if I've noticed in my life that if there's something I can skip and not have any bad results from, I feel more efficient, and so that's part of the reason why I don't do it. The other reason really is I just don't think it makes any sense to rip on the plant's root system, which doesn't really occur in nature, and do that as part of the transplant process. Now, if it's root bound and being fed nutrients in a small cup, I can kind of see that maybe put into a new medium that wouldn't be best used and might cause some death of roots. And
I totally agree with this, by the way. I don't understand why when you go to the nursery or whatever it is, they tell you, or just everyone tells you when you plant shit that you rip up the root ball. I don't get it. I guess maybe if it's completely root bound because it's been at the nursery forever, which is like every plant at Home Depot or whatever. Obviously it's root bound, but I still don't even get why you would rip it up. Wouldn't it be just fine if you just put it in the ground? You don't need to rip it up. Just put it in the ground. Maybe put some recharge on it or something. It'll be fine. I just don't understand why you would rip up the roots, because that's how the thing lives, dude. Anyways, let's go.
things, but in the living soil system, following the BuildASoil way, when you're transplanting on time, I don't think that it's part of the requirement at all. And personally, it's just a way that I do it. And a lot of the BuildASoil way is just stuff that I've come to do and as commonplace practice. But I will say, I have friends that break up the root ball. When I see them do it, I'm just like, ugh, something that may not be of concern. Devin, I got the take and bake. I've got everything mixed and my kashi blend is working. Hopefully that means it's working. Laugh out loud. I was curious, how long do I leave it like that? Should I add the mulch layer next? You know, it's totally up to you. You can basically use that soil right away. But what I've noticed from most people that have purchased it is they say it does get a little bit warm depending on the moisture level and all those things. And so it would be best to let it sit in an ideal world for 7 to 14 days. And during that time period, you probably remix it 2 to 3 times just to get the outside to the inside and process through, because most of the heat and biological activity comes from the volume, and that's going to be in the center mass of it. That's why we gave you one big pot to mix it all together. But then you can take the outsides and kind of swirl it together and mix it, and that should fully finish the process. It's finished cooking. And then you can just use it. At that point, I put it into whatever container I want and put the mulch in. If you're going to plant right into there, you can basically just write it out. You know, 2 weeks is plenty, and you can plant right into it. I would say you could probably plant.
What's up, Day Neutral Preserves? What's up, Junior? So let's see. I could ask him about the take and bake. Should I ask him about take and bake? His like take and bake packages. I mean, I don't know. I love like basically everything BuildASoil does, and this guy's super smart. So I'm just stoked to talk to him. And it seems like everything that his company puts out is just, it's worth buying because it's like great. You know what I mean? But maybe I'm just rose-colored glasses over here or whatever. Just in love with this guy. But I'd be up for him to talk about the take and bake thing because it seems interesting. Let's see. Take and bake BuildASoil. It's fucking Papa John's ads. All right. Can you guys see that? Yeah, you can. All right. So this is the take and bake kit. This is $357. This is how many gallons of soil? Makes approximately 70 gallons of soil, and it comes with a 100-gallon pot. So they give you this giant ass fabric pot to mix everything in. And that's 70 gallons of soil. So two 30-gallon pots worth of soil plus change for $360. What do you get? You get worm castings, you get compost, you get pumice, you get rice hulls, you get biochar and root wise, you get peat moss, you get koala extract, kashi blend, clackamas coot style nutrient kit. So you get the soil itself, which is your compost, the rice hulls, the rice hulls help. They have aeration, and they're also going to add calcium. You've got all these things in there, plus your nutrients, basically. That's what I'm trying to say. So that's a decent deal. It's definitely like, it's not cheap because he does have to ship it to you. So the shipping is in that cost, you know? You could, if you can source some of this stuff locally, like if you could source compost and other stuff locally, you could do it cheaper. But if you just want to get all their best stuff, it's pretty easy. And if you've got the budget, obviously. But anyways, pretty rad. So we could have him talk about that if you want. I don't know. Let me know in the chat if you guys are still here. Let me know if you think I should ask him about that. Let me find another video. I'm gonna get some water, but I'll queue up another video of him and I'll get that. I'll let that start playing while I go get some water. Harvest Day. Let's see. I like his FAQ videos. Because people ask interesting questions.
Hello and welcome to another Build.
All right. I got to put myself on mute. Let me know in the chat, like I said, if you think I should ask him about BuildASoil's take and bake, or just let me know if you have other questions that you think I should ask him. I'm trying to get some ideas here. I'm going to put myself on mute while I get this playing.
BuildASoil FAQ episode. Today we have FAQ 8, Season 4. As per usual, Dean has whipped up a series of questions. I printed them off my printer without looking, and I'm going to flip it over, start reading the questions live in real time just to keep it candid and answer them to the best of my ability. If you want some of your questions answered like this, please drop them in this video or any of our other videos. We go through there regularly to pull questions for these FAQ videos. For two reasons. One, we want to answer your question. Two, if we answer it on camera, it answers it for hundreds, if not thousands of people instead of just you, and it helps us all get better. So thank you for your questions. Okay, here we go. FAQ 8, Season 4, Dave. Dave says, huge shout out to the BAS family for all the great info. I'm wondering about CO2. I've yet to see any hanging bags or any type of CO2 generator. Where do the plants get CO2? I'm really glad that you asked this. This is a good question. We did address it a little bit, I believe Season 1, maybe it was Season 2, but what we did is we put a CO2 measuring device in there, which I've still got, I should get out. And we started measuring that, and then we also grew mushrooms in the tent next door, and we would duct in the
Day Neutral Preserves had a good point. He uses Build a Bloom. Let's see. This is Build a Bloom. So this is like there's some at the very end bottom of this bag, but it's a dry powder. Basically, they've powderized a bloom nutrient. So people seem to love it too. Well, and it's all organic. That's what I love about it. I try to grow when I grow outside, I try to grow as organically as possible. Mostly for two reasons. One, it makes me feel good, but also I think it's a fun challenge. All right. So thanks. We've still got people watching. So Thanks for watching. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, and also thank you. I hope this is interesting. But let's see. I'm just trying to get some interview questions for my interview with Jeremy. I'm going to interview this guy up here on the screen. I'm going to be interviewing him on Sunday. You can watch it live on Cannabis this Sunday for members only, and then we'll post it on the YouTube channel, this YouTube channel, about a week and a half from now. So stay tuned for that one. So yeah, I'm going to play this some more. Let me know if you have any questions in the chat that you think I should ask Jeremy. Very interested in your ideas.
Mushroom CO2 that they were producing into our grow tent. And so we started by getting a base average, and then we started ducting it in to get some better numbers. And long story short, we did a pretty terrible job at actually leveraging the data from the mushrooms and the increase in CO2. But one of the things that we do as far as the BuildASoil way is when it comes to just a regular indoor BuildASoil way grow, we do not supplement CO2. What we do instead is we use fresh air. And fresh air is important because that's what carries with it the CO2. So if you have a tent and you have a plant growing in that tent and there's stagnant air, there's no air movement, you have no oscillating fan, you have no intake or exhaust, what can happen is the plant can actually breathe in that CO2 and utilize it for its own energy. However, the area right around the leaf surface could be depleted of CO2. What we do in the greenhouse is a lot of times they'll do like a smoke test. So you can watch the air move in your greenhouse based on how you set up your horizontal airflow fans and your exhaust fans. The whole idea, even if you don't need ventilation, is to have horizontal air movement so that you replace the air near the leaf with new air that has fresh CO2 in it. And that way, that fresh air is constantly supplying CO2 at a real world level. Now, here's some of the things that we've learned. If you use 30 gallons or big beds of soil and that life is active and you have a mulch layer and it's breaking down, oftentimes we will see an elevated level of CO2s. So our commercial grows that measure this have told us that they get elevated levels, and all they have to do is manage that by having a monitor and either exhausting or doing whatever it takes. But most of the time we don't do anything. When it comes to increasing yield and using CO2, here's the thought. If you've got genetics that can handle it, you've got a dialed in environment, and you've maxed out your DLI, so your lights are as bright as they can get during the period that you're flowering, the next addition to allow it to handle a greater intensity of light and handle utilizing nutrients even faster would be to supplement CO2. Right? You've heard that theory about the limiting factor. And so I would consider it like an athlete running out of oxygen or running at below their potential for oxygen. It's going to lower their performance. But one of the other considerations is that you can get an athlete to perform well at high altitude and get used to that. So I don't think you necessarily need to supplement. I think healthy plants that are growing in living soil, and that soil produces some CO2, and you have fresh air movement, you're going to have more than enough CO2 for the plants to do their job. And if you're focusing on quality, you're not going to be driving the plants so hard that their limiting factor is CO2. More than likely, it's going to be biological available of nutrients, it's going to be the genetics potential, the ceiling, the height, all of those things. I will tell you from experience, if you're new and you're reading about how to grow, you're going to see a lot on CO2. Where this typically came from was a sealed room where the plants would deplete the air that's in there, and so they needed fresh CO2 to be able to maintain. When you're bringing in constant fresh air, you need less CO2. However, a lot of commercial grows, to maximize yield, will put CO2 in. I believe this reduces the quality, doesn't produce as good a quality as herb, and there's a lot of facilities, either commercial or just regular indoor growers, that are trying to get the best quality, that have played with CO2, without CO2. And I think at best, it's a commercial play for better yield, and it still has some timing and some practices that need to be implemented. But when it comes to living soil, I don't think you need it. So there's my answer. Really what I want you to hear is the BuildASoil way is to have fresh airflow. We don't build sealed rooms. I've never discussed that, but you got to picture old school grow rooms completely sealed. And this is because you had 1,000-watt lights with glass hoods and you had air ducts connecting them. And the idea was to run cold air through those lights constantly. But that would, if you ran that much cold air just to control the heat of the light, you'd be sucking all of your humidity out. And so the idea with the sealed room was to create an ideal environment, run exterior air through the lights and right out so that none of it's actually affecting your grow room, and then just keep the ideal temperature and humidity in that sealed room so the plants could crush it. The big limiting factor would be CO2 at that point. Without fresh air, you're just not going to have enough CO2. So that's where it comes from. Where it went to is to maximize yield. You can certainly supplement CO2, but for the average living soil grower, I would recommend to avoid it, and I would take a grain of salt with all the information you read about it. There's a lot of weaker links typically in a grow room before CO2. And if you're at the point where it's your last link, you can definitely mess with it. But my final thought is this. If you're just hanging a CO2 grow bag in there, I don't believe it's going to sustain the proper level of CO2 to make a big enough difference over a set period of time. I feel like nature, when it comes to growing a plant, they're smart enough to know what they're dependent upon. And so if I were to half-ass put humidity in there, I don't think it would be as good as actually dialing the humidity in or not worrying about the humidity entirely. But when it spikes high and spikes low and spikes high and spikes low, I think that's harder on the plants. Same thing with those CO2 bags. Unless you're measuring it and you're just hanging it, I don't believe it's going to make a huge difference. Another thing that you'll hear when you first start growing, which I've done, so I've done all these, that's how I've learned, is you can take water and I believe it's sugar, maybe molasses, and you put yeast in it and you put it in a jug and you take a tube and you connect it and you run it around your plants. And that should create pressure that releases CO2 from the fermentation, and it puts that near your plants while they're growing. I don't think you need that, just fresh air. And so that's my answer. I hope that helps you. Kind of went off on a tangent, but that one is all over.
Really interesting points there about CO2. Let me know in the chat if you have any questions that you think we should ask Jeremy from BuildASoil. He made me think about a topic that I saw come up on Instagram, which was lighting and under canopy lights, basically. Does he does he have any opinions on that? Basically, can plants absorb light or benefit from light on from light that hits the undersides of their leaves? Be curious. Alien Labs recently posted their LED light setup, and they caught some flack in the comments. Yeah, they caught some flack in the comments. Alien Labs did, because Alien Labs, they have lights underneath the canopy, and they looked like they were like red and blue LEDs. And they were catching some flack for like, why are you doing all this shit? You noob, like, plants can't absorb light or benefit from light from the underside of their leaves. So he says they've tested it and proved that it works. At least they've seen a benefit, an increase in the things that they wanted to see increases in. So be curious if Jeremy has any thoughts on that stuff. All right. I've been live now for almost 40 minutes, but yeah, got some good questions. I'm going to keep thinking about this stuff. Let me know in the comments if you have any ideas or questions that you think that we should ask Jeremy this Sunday. And otherwise, I will see you in the next one. Please, if you aren't already, please become a member of the Cannabis community. We'd really appreciate your support. It helps us pay our bills for keeping the community going, and just paying for various things like Zoom, Canva, all kinds of different costs involved with running this stuff. So, and we also use it to send out seeds. So we give away seeds every stream now. When we do these interviews, we do a giveaway at the very, very end of the interview. We do a giveaway for a pack of seeds. We've been giving away Tiki Madman seeds. We've been giving away Weed Should Taste Good seeds. We've got tons more. So stay tuned. All you have to do is become a member of the Cannabis community, and you can leave a comment during the live stream, and that will enter you to win giveaway that we do. But thank you so much for watching. I appreciate people just jumping on the stream and hanging out with me on YouTube tonight. Really appreciate it. I hope you all have a great night. It's Wednesday, right? So hope you have a great day tomorrow, and I will see you again soon. Peace.